right, good evening. My name is Charles Walker, and I'm going to moderate our panel discussion as well as facilitate the question and answer segment. So I know that you all are obviously excited to be here to talk about education in Georgia. On behalf of the Atlanta Regional Civic League, I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your interest in this very, very important topic. We are joined today by some very distinguished professionals in the area of education. I would like for you to take a look at your program for more details about their experience. We have a brief biography included in the program, and so to move the conversation along, I'm just going to introduce them by name and title. And to my immediate left and your right, we're going to start with Amy Mast, Director for the Georgia Alliance of Education Agency Heads, followed by Steve Dolinger, who is the President of Georgia Partership for Excellence in Education, James Minor, who is the Director for Higher Education Programs with the Southern Education Foundation, and finally, Mr. Brad Bryant, who is the Executive Director for the Georgia Foundation for Public Education. Let's start off by first providing any remarks, initial thoughts, comments based on what was shared by our presenter. Anything jumps out immediately for you?
I'll go ahead and start. I'm, again, Amy Mast with our Alliance of Education Agency Heads, Georgia's P20 Council, which is our state education agencies convening organization that partners state education agency heads with our partnering organizations, and we work on issues from early childhood, really that cradle to career, early childhood, K-12, higher education through our university system and technical college system. And one of the things that the Chancellor spoke about, I loved her slide on the fragmentation that really kind of splits us apart, and the need for a unified system of education nationally. One step that we're making in Georgia is through our P20 Council, where we do have a common vision for education, a common goal to really support students when they enter our pre-K programs, really at the 4-year-old level, but even starting at birth all the way through K-12 and into the university system, the technical college system, through careers. And it, Chancellor, really is about sealing those fragments within our pipeline, within our education pipeline, and it's about strengthening the engagement of partnerships through some of the initiatives we have, where we're having to broaden our base of effectiveness, broaden our base of partnerships through initiatives like Ready by 21, which Milton Little spoke about. Just an incredible partnership that we've developed that marries policy with state policy makers with practice through the United Way, through district partnerships, school partnerships, and community partnerships. So we've got a real lead on that through our Ready by 21 partnership that is very similar to the Strive Network, where it's all about bringing people through a common vision to strengthen and support students around filling those gaps in our P20 pipeline.
Great. Thank you.
Steve Dolinger, President of the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. I love the model. We've long worked with Ready by 21. We call it the Birth to Work pipeline. The partnership is a nonprofit organization. It was created 20 years ago. This is actually our 20th anniversary by the Georgia Chamber and the Georgia Economic Development Association to be the business voice for education. Our work centers around policy, research, and engagement. So that engagement piece for us on the ground, and we've worked with many of you, it's not quite as sophisticated a model as we heard this evening, but we call our community strategic planning. And we've worked in Troup County when they knew Kia Motors was coming in. We've worked in Emmanuel County. In Metro, we've worked with Henry County, recently with Forsyth County. And we say if you bring everyone together, we will help you with that. Our core competency is not strategic planning, it's that policy and research work. But we really do like to bring everyone to the table, and we come out with the data. look at the data in that whole pipeline and see where your community is strong or it's weak, what's missing, and then come up with the strategies that are research-based, evidence-based strategies that can really help you make a difference. It's interesting to come back. We've been working in Foresight. They've got a program called Propel that the chamber and the school system wanted to work on. And since I've been a superintendent, I knew the superintendent there pretty well, and I said, Buster Evans, why do you want us to come help you? You're the highest performing school system in the state. He said, Steve, that's our issue. Our economics are changing, our demographics are changing, but we want to make sure we stay number one. If we don't, we'll lose economic advantage. So the chamber and the school system came together, brought everyone else together, because you're talking about healthy mothers and healthy babies. You need the hospitals and the churches and everyone there to look at the data. And we did some checking around the country, found 4 similar school systems that have been changing pretty dramatically, but have been able to keep the arrows going up with their achievement. They want us to come back now 1 year later and see the gains that they've made to stay number 1 in Georgia. Their goal is to be number 1 in the country. So the research is really clear. Programs like Stride that bring everyone together, get really focused, use the data, get strategic in the implementation is really the right thing. Both hard research and even anecdotal feedback, that's what's going to move the needle, and that's what can help us in Georgia, even if we have to do it 1 county at a time.
Good, thanks. Good evening. Charles, I think you asked the question of what might be the reaction or response to Nancy's talk. I'm James Minor. I direct the higher education programs at the Southern Education Foundation, which is very near here. It was founded in 1867, nearly 150 years old, to provide educational equity and access to members of what was then the New South, right? There are 2 observations I want to make, Nancy. The first is about the SHOT report that you referenced. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where about 48% of students graduate from high school, and so I'm very aware what the social and economic reality of that is. And I also taught for a good while in the university. Right now, in my present capacity, we work with lots of institutions that will report to us that somewhere between 70 and 90% of the students who are income and first-year students in college require at least 1 developmental education course in pursuit of a college degree. So the idea is that we lose about half of them who don't even graduate from college. The other half who may make it are academically underprepared, and most of them don't have enough money in hand to get beyond the first year of college, which is very problematic. So we, the other observation about this is sort of why I fix it or what the problem is we have noticed in the last, I would argue in the last decade, that there's been a philosophical shift. Those of you who follow higher education will know the Supreme Court is now pondering this use of race again in college admissions. And probably a decade ago, we argued about who should go to college, who should have an opportunity, as a matter of social justice, right? Was it right? Was it just? Was it equitable? Today, that argument, I think, over the last decade has changed quite significantly. So in addition to asking the question in terms of what's just, equitable, or fair, who goes to college, who graduates, is very much an economic and a democratic issue. Right now, the U.S., adults, they're probably 39% of Americans have a college degree. And most of us who study this stuff would agree that we need to be a lot closer to 60%. That's about 20 million new degree holders. And so you ask the question, how do we get there? What needs to happen? And there are problems, right? The 2 fastest growing populations in our country right now are the least likely to graduate from high school, least likely to enroll in college, and the least likely to graduate from college. And so now when I go and talk to state legislators about higher education in their state, it's very much an economic issue. We know the workforce analysts will tell us that by 2018, there'll probably be as many as 3 million jobs in America that we can't fill because we don't have a sufficient number of college graduates with the requisite knowledge and skills to fill those positions. That's the second observation. The third is the issue of technology. And I don't mean computers on a desk in a classroom. I mean the apparatus by which you accomplish a task, right? fundamental definition of technology. And what that is, you'll never hear me argue about the value of bringing together civic organizations around a table that have a common cause. But one thing I think we miss is the importance of the agenda and framing of the problem. And so, yeah, maybe we've got a system problem, but I would argue we've also got a technology problem. So what are we coming around the table to actually fix or solve is a very important part of that equation. So those would be three quick observations that I make. Thanks.
Excellent. Brad.
Thank you, Brad Bryant. And I just want to say ditto to everything that Nancy said. When you hear a presentation like that, your first response is, we've got to go out and get us some of that. And I just would say, as a thank you to Milton Little, is because of his vision, Atlanta and greater Atlanta is substantially down the road in doing exactly what Nancy put up on her slides. And so what I'd like to do with the couple of minutes I've got is just explain a little bit about the differences that I see with Ready by 21 in the context of that neither one of these is the silver bullet, and we need more efforts like Strive and Ready by 21 rather than fewer. And if other communities can figure out how to do it better, then we need to emulate them, and we need to jump on that bandwagon as quickly as possible. A couple of things that I would note is that when I looked at Strive Cincinnati several years ago, what I noted was that while the problems that were described on the screen were very real and are present in all of our communities, if you take an area like Greater Cincinnati, they had 40,000 K-12 students that they were working with. Alvin Wilbanks, who's sitting at the table with Nancy, has 4 times that number in his district alone. And in the greater Atlanta region, we have 17 districts with well over 100 locally elected school board members and 17 superintendents. Having been a local board member, I would say that trying to get them together around a common table is like herding cats. And even if they were all the type of superintendent with the stability that Alvin brings to the table, it's very hard to craft an agenda out of that. So I think where Milton was really smart in pulling us together was to say, let's look at the insulation that we've got to put around these kids and figure out what we've got to do to make sure that they have the supports on the social side. And if we can do that, we can start to get a conversation around the education. At the same time that was going on, Steve, Amy, and a group of dedicated folks at the state level were talking about how we tried to make coherence out of a state agenda, realizing that you could go anywhere in Georgia as you can in anywhere in the United States and end up with that same dismal look of 100 kids down to 19 or less than that in a lot of areas. So we really had a crossroads effort to pull together, and Atlanta is uniquely situated as opposed to a number of the cities that are up there in that we were the state capital.
Right.
So we had the state policymakers, many of whom had worked and been highly successful, like Steve in Fulton County as the district superintendent, who could bring the practice and the policy together. And so what Milton kind of gave me an opportunity to do was to take, if you look at his write-up, he gave me 1, 4, and 6 of those 6 community goals. So children entering school ready, babies born healthy, because if we don't start them out right, we're going to end up always being behind. And then the young people avoiding risky behaviors. And I didn't realize it was that big of a moment. And I walked out of a meeting with Jean, and she said, do you just realize that we brought together the number 1 and number 6 that have never worked together, the school ready to learn and the young people. And so we're in the infancy stages. We're not as far down the path as Cincinnati. One of the takeaways I've got for today is that I like the idea of action teams, and I'm nodding at Jean, to try to make sure that we practice fidelity in all of those areas. But I can tell you we are on top of everything that Nancy mentioned. Like her, we didn't realize until Kanye's article came out in the Stanford Social Innovation that what we were doing was creating collective social impact.
Right.
One of the things he says, and you touched on this about the 6-year-old, is that he suggests that we've taken complicated problems and tried to put simple solutions when we're dealing with complex issues. And my friend Bill Bowling knows that the hunger issues are interwrapped with everything else. So we've got to figure out how we do complex issues, which means we've got to be nimble. We've got to be willing to put our egos behind us and work together for the common good. And I would say the last thing that is, having been around this for 20 years, and I pull this out today because I think America loved Winston Churchill more than England did. But I always try to paint a picture of what it means to me, and I think that we have yet to have that Dunkirk moment in America around our youth. And I just would point out that when Churchill talked about Dunkirk and what happened there, it was not the Navy or the Air Force rescuing 300,000 British and French troops that were stranded with their backs up and in the water. It was the military, but it was 700 ships that were merchant marine, fishing boats, pleasure craft, and lifeboats that all answered the call and went across the English Channel repeatedly to rescue the soldiers that would have met their death had it not been for that. We've got to get all of our ships in the water on behalf of youth in America, and we've got to do it in Atlanta. And we've got to cross as long as it takes to get those kids into the safety of a nurturing community. I don't think we're there yet, and so I will join with Nancy and her team whenever and wherever they need us to, because whether she's a destroyer or that lifeboat, it doesn't matter. She's doing what she's supposed to do, as I think we are. And Milton, again, just thank you for the opportunity to serve you and United Way, because it has added meaning to my life in terms of how I approach problems, issues, and working with the youth in the Atlanta area. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so it sounds as though, based on what you all have shared, your comments, that Georgia and the metropolitan Atlanta area, we're moving in the right direction when it comes to education. And I want to stay with our theme, which is what's right in a region, before we start having conversations about challenges and opportunities. And want to simply ask, Amy, can you tell us, in your opinion, your thoughts, what do you feel we're doing right in Georgia? What's one thing that we're really doing right?
Well, in terms of our common focus that the Chancellor really spoke about, through our Alliance of Education Agency Heads that Brad has mentioned, we really are all about the business of strengthening collaboration, which the Chancellor mentioned, in terms of bringing together public partners, business partners, nonprofit and community partners. And we're really focusing on early learning, reading by the 3rd grade, our high school graduation rates. College completion is a huge priority for us in terms of Complete College America, which James has referenced, the crisis in this country in terms of where we need to be in global competitiveness. Each one of our institutions in our university system and technical college systems have target goals and indicators in terms of their completion rates. So not just based on enrollment and admissions, James, but how many students actually complete a 1-year certification, a 2-year degree, and a 4-year degree program in Georgia. And then finally, really focusing in on teacher and leader effectiveness, supporting our teachers and really helping them to support our students through what they need in this P20 pipeline.
Excellent. Steve, we heard a lot about data, the value of data, how data is used. Obviously, when we talk about education and we look at education both on a local level, county level, state level, how can we more effectively use data collectively in order to work to enhance education opportunities for students in Georgia?
Well, we finally have a statewide student information system. As I go across the state, people often ask me, Steve, why is Georgia underperforming other states with similar demographics? And it's because for a long time these other states have had strong curriculum, high standards, a clear accountability system with reports, statewide student information system, and a strong leadership training program. Well, Georgia just finally put those in place. Just recently we put the statewide student information system in place where we can really have that database. So we're really late getting into the game. And kind of like what Nancy said, though, it's not like these other states are sitting back and waiting for us to catch up. They're still hustling to stay where they are. So we've got that information in place, but we work now, and it hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. It's still the software and hardware, the training, and then the support, meaning replenishing data, hardware, and the training for teachers. We are hurting in Georgia in our public schools for that professional development training. Over the last several years, we consistently have that part of our budget cut, where we don't have the funding for professional development. And years ago, some of you may remember with the lottery was originally for Hope, pre-K, and technology. The technology got cut out. So some school systems, and Gwinnett's leading the way there, that we have robust systems, we have virtual programs, but across our state, particularly when you get outside Metro Atlanta into rural Georgia, they are behind in what they need for the hardware, software, training, and support.
Great. At this time, we're going to ask Dr. Zimpher to please join the panel. We're going to open up the conversation to you all. If you have any questions for our presenter or any of the panelists, please raise your hand and someone will be able to assist you. Right down front, Mr. Shorthouse.
Nancy, could you tell us a little bit about how you factored in parents into the equation to ensure that these early childhood goals and then readiness for kindergarten and first grade were met, or was that not part of your strategy?
Well, that's a great question, because even in the reception, I was talking to someone about grassroots and grass tops, how you bring neighborhood organizations and parent groups. Often neighborhoods are not well organized. How you bring the faith community to get parents engaged at that level as well. So I think they're very critical to this initiative. The challenge, and we certainly had this in Albany, is we had a lot of neighborhood groups formed to sort of attack the problem, and yet we didn't have the capacity that business and educational institutions and community agencies bring. So there's a tension there, I think. And what we did in Cincinnati is try to form neighborhood and community groups that we brought to the table regularly to check our work. And I learned today that, parents don't know much about these Common Core standards. They don't really understand much about the assessments that we're going to be looking at in a couple of years. And it's that kind of education that's needed to get parents engaged. So I think they're critically important. Obviously, parents are the first teacher.
Right, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Are there any other questions? One here.
Nancy, can you talk about how among all of those different organizations you measured collective impact, what those indicators looked like for Strive?
Well, the most common indicators, this isn't rocket science, so it's pretty easy to lay out. In Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, there were actually 4 different school districts, but they pretty much stuck to kindergarten readiness, 4th and 8th grade achievement, high school graduation, matriculation to college, and college persistence. They also have struggled with an indicator for social well-being. There's not a good instrument for this, and so they've tried and thrown them out and gone back and are still looking for some measures that show the developmental confidence of students as an indicator as well. And by the way, I wanted to respond to the demographic. The comments that you've made here are just terrific. Houston is the 3rd largest city in the country, and they've organized their Strive-like effort as a hub and spokes. So I know that Cincinnati is not the demographic equivalent of Atlanta, but Houston is, and Seattle is, and New York City is, and I don't think it's about size and scale. I think it's about getting organized. And I really think that I'm a university president. There is nothing you can't ask me that I'm not going to say we already do. Do you understand what I'm saying? But the really hard work is deciding what you're not going to do. And what the central core investments are going to be. So the 4 people at this panel lead and work within organizational contexts that are all doing really good work. But it's like all of us, it sort of turns out to be parallel play. That's the challenge, because nobody wants to lose their identity in the mix. And so you almost have to create a new identity that neutralizes the individual identity that comes to the table to do the work and reduce the clutter and determine what you do that matters most. And that, I think, I can't in 20 minutes or 20 weeks tell you how hard that is. But you know how hard it is. And so it sounds to me like you're well on your way, but there is another step that has to be taken, which is you know where the core activity is being determined and who's determining it.
Excellent. Okay, one final question.
And I'm just addressing this to kind of the panel as a whole, but Dr. Miner was talking about us looking and striving toward a 60% collegiate graduate rate. And what I'm a little curious about is it seems like the jobs that we have, the careers that we have, don't require the college degrees. It's more the technical college preparation. As a high school teacher myself in the alternative school in our system, I see students that come to us that have failed the foreign language time after time, the higher math and science time after time, and I ask them, what do you want to do when you get out of high school? And they say, well, I want to be a mechanic. And I think there's a problem someplace where we're not ensuring that our counselors and our parents are really ensuring that the kids that need to be steered toward college are being steered toward college. And in the same respect as what you're saying with it's the choice to not do something, I think in some respects we need to make the choice not to send the student that doesn't need to go to your university system school to a university system school. How do we educate our parents and counselors so they understand that? Because there's a stigma associated with not attending college, it seems.
Yeah. Those are really good points. I'll just say 2 quick things. The first is this 60% of adults with a degree. It really is inclusive of what we call a post-secondary credential. That'd be sort of the catch-all phrase, which would include an associate's degree from a community college, which would include a certificate of some kind for a technical trade or skill. So, and I think there's recognition in the workforce industry that we need a range of people who are qualified to move into the workforce. The one thing that we're certain about is that a high school diploma is not enough. And so the question is, the second part of your comment is then how do we align students with the appropriate post-secondary opportunities? This is a very difficult problem. When I was a faculty member at Michigan State, we would sort of circle around and do these projects. We learned 2 things really quickly: that students didn't have good information from their homes about their post-secondary, that transition from high school to some post-secondary institution. But even worse, they didn't have good information in their schools. So the idea is sort of how do you orient students who are trying to find post-secondary opportunities about which institutions are appropriate, how do you get financial aid, et cetera. And what we learned very quickly is that the ratio for high school guidance counselors per student was somewhere 586 per student. And then we had school districts, because of the budget, who had part-time counselors, right? They were in the school only 3 days a week. And the counselors would tell us that, well, when we engage students, we don't spend a lot of time talking about college. We spend most of our time talking about how to get out of high school, okay? So there are very challenges. Now, in the university setting, I also talk to students all the time who say, I want to go to the University of Michigan, I want to go to USC. and I asked them about their academic profile, right? And what we find is that there's a drastic mismatch, right? That when students realize, well, the average income student at USC, notwithstanding it costs about $50,000 a year to attend, has a 29 on the ACT and a 3.8 GPA. So there's a lot of work to be done in this educational pipeline. One of the places we lose a lot of students is the transition from high school to college, and it's not because they're not eligible.
Right.
It's because they're not well informed about what the post-secondary options are. A lot of work to be done there.
Excellent. Well, let's give our presenter and panelists a round of applause. To piggyback on that. Again, we'd like to thank our event chair, the Honorable Kathy Ash, our host committee, the board of directors for the Atlanta Regional Civic League, and you for attending today. Please drive home safely. Thank you.
Congratulations.